Today we're going to diagnose and repair a radio that's not working on a 2014 F-150. We have absolutely no audio output from the factory stereo in this truck, and the customer's already replaced the audio control module with one they got from a salvage yard, and he said it worked for about 20 minutes and then stopped working again, and I don't know if it's got the original stereo in it or the replacement one in it right now. So let's get into it. And I'm going to be using an OBD Link MX Plus with 4-scan light on an iPhone today for diagnosis. Now I had to take a few seconds here for 4-scan to find and communicate with all the modules on all the networks on this vehicle. So now that it's done searching for modules on the networks on this vehicle, I'm going to scroll down the list and see if the ACM is on it. And the reason I'm looking at this is to see if the audio control module has communication on the networks. Now if it does and it's on the list, that's going to verify that the ACM has power and ground and the network wires to it are good. And we can see here the ACM is on our list of modules that are communicating on this vehicle. So let's take a look and see what we have for codes in this vehicle. In the APM or the sync module, it looks like we've got a U0184, lost communication with the radio. We also have a U0256, lost communication with the front controls interface module. Now, the FCIM, or the front control interface module, is the technical name for the bezel in the center of the dash with all the buttons and controls on it. That controls the radio, the temperature control in the vehicle, things like that. Now technically it is a module because when you press a button on it, it does go out over the network rather than any of the buttons actually being hardwired to anything. And I'm going to guess both of these codes were probably set when the customer replaced their own ACM. I think they probably turned the key on without the ACM or the radio on the vehicle. And they probably also turned the key on without the front control interface module plugged in. So I don't know that those are really relevant or actual codes. I mean, we can clear them and see if they come back, but it looks like we also have a code in the RCM, but I don't think that's relevant to what we're looking at this for today. And we've got a battery voltage code in the power steering. And I've noticed this vehicle cranks a little slowly, possibly from them having the key on, for an extended period of time while they were working on the radio without having the battery charger installed. So I don't really know that any of those are relevant to what we're looking at this for today. So at this point, let's go ahead and try and run a quick on-demand test on the sync module or the APIM and also the audio control module. And we'll take the sync module first just because it's at the top of the list. And if you've never done an on-demand test on a Ford module, it basically just tests the inputs and outputs and makes sure they're functioning properly as much as it can tell. And our on-demand test on the sync module is passed. So let's go ahead and try and run one on the audio control module. And I'm not really sure if this test is going to be valid since we can't really turn the radio on or tune it to a radio station. And it immediately fails. Like I say, I'm not sure that that's really valid though since we can't even turn the audio control module on. Next, let's try and look at some PIDs. Let's make sure our front control interface module is working correctly and the buttons on it are working properly. And also that it's putting the information out on the network correctly when the button is pressed. Now I'm going to check the box here for front control interface module. And then we're going to select what PIDs we're going to view. Looks like the menu button's already selected, and that's fine, we'll take that. Let's take the OK button as well. I was really wanting or looking for a PID for the power button or the on button, but I don't see that listed here, so I guess we're not going to be able to take that. We'll go ahead and take the volume button as well. Let's go ahead and take the key position PID and make sure it's reading correctly, and also the vehicle power PID. Okay, so we can see our system voltage is down to 11.9 volts. I should probably get a battery charger connected fairly soon. If we cycle the ignition switch off and on, it reads correctly. Ignition is what it reads in the on position. And we can go ahead and try cranking it and make sure that reads correctly. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to take a quick second here and connect a battery charger just to get our system voltage up a little bit. With our voltage reading a little higher, let's go ahead and check some of the buttons. Let's start with the menu button. And it looks like it reads correctly when it's pressed. Let's go ahead and try the AM/FM button next to make sure it works. And it looks like it works correctly. We'll go ahead and try the OK button. And it looks like it works correctly. And let's go ahead and try the volume button since we've got it selected. And it looks like it works correctly as well. So at this point, I'm fairly satisfied that the front control interface module and the buttons are all working correctly. I wish we could take a look at or check the power button or the on button for the radio, but there is not a PID for that I see. So we're going to move on and let's look at some PIDs in the audio control module. So let's go back to our modules list and we'll scroll down, and this time we're going to select ACM or audio control module. And let's take a look and see what the available PIDs are for the audio control module. We'll go ahead and take primary audio source. And let's go ahead and take key position again. And let's go ahead and take vehicle power. And we'll go ahead and take the steering wheel voice command button just for an input. And the first thing that stands out to me on this list is that it is reading the key off, and the ignition switch is in the on position. Let's try cycling the key from off to on a couple of times. Okay, there. For just a split second, it reads ignition when I turn the key forward, but then it goes right back to key off. And there it did it again for a second. So at this point, I am fairly convinced we have an internal problem in the audio control module causing our issue today. We know the key position's going out on the network properly. We verified that with the front control interface module reading it correctly. The audio control module is coming on for a split second and then going back off when we turn the key on. The ACM is failing self-test or an on-demand test. So at this point, I think we are going to put in a new ACM. So it looks like they have left all the screws out of this from when they put an ACM in it, which I guess will make our life a little easier. And I know they've already put an ACM in this vehicle, but they did say it worked for 20 minutes afterwards, which does suggest to me that probably was the problem with the vehicle originally. And yeah, it would be kind of a coincidence for a second ACM to be bad as well, but it was a used part from a salvage yard, and we are starting to see quite a few of these failing as they get older. So with all of the screws already removed, the front control interface module is just going to pull off. We're going to have several connectors to disconnect. We've got a top one there. There is several at the bottom and then one on the side. Let's go ahead and get that side one, and I don't know that we're even going to have to remove the bottom ones. We can probably just slide it over there out of the way, like that. And there is our audio control module. Basically, it's a radio with no buttons on the front of it. And we have no screws holding the ACM in either, so that's just going to pull out of there. There were should be 2 screws on each side attaching it to the vehicle, and then we've got the electrical connectors on the back. The first one is the satellite radio antenna. This is the normal antenna. It doesn't want to come out, so let's move on to an electrical connector. Just one of those, and let me see if I can get the bigger one. And it's being stubborn. I may have to put the camera down for a second. We've got the ACM removed from the dash now, and we're going to go get a new one. And we have a remanufactured ACM we're going to be installing. If anybody's wondering, this unit did come from Ford Motor Company, and it was about $250. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and plug in our electrical connectors. We're going to start with the big one. We'll go ahead and get the antenna cable plugged in. And the satellite antenna. And we'll go ahead and slide it into its spot in the dash. And I see that they left all their screws on the floor here, so we're going to go ahead and install the screws that they left out. There's 2 on each side of the audio control module to hold it into the dash. 7mm screws. And we'll go ahead and put the front control interface module in. We'll get all the electrical connectors connected on the back that were previously disconnected. And we'll go ahead and get this snapped into place. Before we spend too much more time snapping the rest of this back together, let's just go ahead and try it once and make sure this does work. So I'm going to turn the key on. And we are on AM. Let's go ahead and switch that to FM and try it. Okay, we've got a working radio, so we're going to go ahead and put the rest of this back together. There are 2 screws that go in the top under the rubber mat that sits up here. There is 1 retaining screw located behind the media hub. And the media hub just has some snap-in locking tabs on each side. It just snaps into the dash. There's also a couple of side screws on each side that hold the front control interface module in, and I forgot to take video of it while I was putting them on. So at this point we're snapping down the side bezels. So with the dash back together and the radio working, we still have one more thing to do, and we need to program the as-built data into the new ACM. And you're probably thinking, why would you have to do that if the radio is working now? And I'm going to show you here along the way, but I'm going to be using ForeScan on a laptop computer, and I do think you have to have the paid version in order to punch in the as-built data. And I downloaded the as-built data from Ford. I think you can also download it from motorcraft.com. We could have recovered it from the ACM before we pulled it out, but I'm not sure if it had the original ACM in it or one from a salvage yard. So it may not have had the right as-built data in the module. And if that's the case, we don't want to use that or transfer it to the new ACM. Basically, the as-built data configures the radio for this vehicle or this particular vehicle and how it's equipped. For example, if we didn't do this, the satellite radio might not work. Okay, so this is the as-built data that's currently loaded into our ACM. It's just a series of hexadecimal numbers and checksums that's used to configure the module for a specific vehicle. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, Ford may use the same ACM in 25 different vehicles, but depending on how those vehicles are equipped from the factory, the ACM may need different features. So rather than making 25 completely different modules, they build one and use as-built data to turn features off and on. And the as-built data can be turning off and on, whether it's looking for a satellite radio or whether it displays a clock in the audio display, things like that. If the vehicle isn't equipped with satellite radio and the radio is looking for a satellite antenna and a satellite button input from the front control interface and the vehicle isn't equipped, the radio is probably going to set codes for that, and by toggling it off, that won't happen. So there's entire forums out there that are just dedicated to hacking Ford as-built codes and what features they turn off and on. So if you're interested in that, Google it. Let's get back to our radio though. So let's start by comparing the as-built data that's actually in the module right now with the as-built data for the ACM that I printed out earlier. So to the left of our as-built data, both in the module that we're reading and on the list I printed out, there's going to be a line number or a three-part number. The first part of that is the module that this is stored in. 727 is going to indicate the audio control module. The second number is going to be the block number, and the third number is going to be the line. So like our first line is 7270101. That's going to be module 727, the audio control module, block 1, line 1. And if we're comparing lines of as-built data, we always want to make sure we're comparing the same lines. I have seen some as-built data come from Ford that was missing some lines out of it, so yeah, you need to make sure the line number is the right one. Everything after that line number is going to be the as-built data for that line in a hexadecimal format, and it may just be 4 characters, it may be 8 characters, or maybe 12 characters. And one thing that's kind of important to know, or at least helpful to know, is the last 2 characters of any line of as-built data is what is called a checksum. There is an algorithm that's used to calculate the last 2 characters, the checksum, from all the other characters in that as-built line. So if you're comparing as-built data like we are here, what's in the module to what I've printed out, you can just quickly scan down the lines, and if the checksum, the last 2 characters of each line, match, then the rest of the line has to match. If any character in that line changes, the checksum changes. So if we quickly scan down our lines of as-built code here and compare the checksums, we can see we've got 8 different lines here that the checksums are different on the end, and we're going to need to change the as-built data on that line. And you can just click on each box and use the delete button and then alter the data in that box, or you can just tab through all the boxes and change the ones that need to be changed. Whatever works, as long as the data matches when you're done. And you can see here that there's not a write button for each line of as-built data, but there is a write button for each block and all the lines contained in that block. So if you only need to change 1 or 2 lines, or they're and they're both in the same block, you can just use that button to write this data to the module. Now since I've got to change 8 lines here, I think I am probably just going to use the write all button at the bottom. So once we're done, it will write all these lines back to the module. And some of them aren't altered, but it's going to rewrite them, which is fine. So we'll get this all changed. And then I'm going to click the write all button down here at the bottom of the screen. And it should only take a few seconds here to write the as-built data to memory. Okay, that's done. Let's check the codes in the ACM and clear any codes we have. Okay, we have a B1A89. That is a satellite antenna code. Now there's a couple of reasons it could have that. It could be the order that I plugged in the module, because I think I plugged in the electrical connectors before the satellite antenna, and maybe it was looking for a satellite antenna before that. And the other possibility is it set that code before we had our as-built data set correctly. Maybe it was looking for a different satellite antenna setup or something. But let's go ahead and clear that and see if it comes back. And it looks like our code has cleared. If it was a hard fault, if there was an issue, you would expect it not to clear or to come back immediately. So I think we're good on that. And that is going to complete the installation of our ACM. So if you found this helpful or interesting, please click the like button down below. I got a lot more great stuff coming up, so please subscribe. And as always, have a great week.